The Navy acknowledges a top secret briefings and a video regarding a UFO episode. However, in a public information request, the Department of Defense says they're not going to release it.
Sent a lot of unusual things to space. Guitars, AI robots, even a golden record. But none of that compares to what Elon Musk sent up at the start of 2018. His very own $100,000 cherry red convertible Tesla Roadster, with a top down and a dummy at the wheel listening to David Bowie, strapped to the most powerful operational rocket in the world, no less, the Falcon Heavy. Since its launch a year ago, it's probably safe to say the Roadster has traveled farther than any other car in history. In fact, it's estimated to be about equal to driving every single road in the world, 22 times. So the question is, where exactly is it? Right now, the Roadster is traveling through space at thousands of kilometers per hour, faster than most fighter jets. But unlike a jet, the Roadster isn't burning any fuel, because it doesn't have to. When SpaceX's Falcon Heavy rocket launched on February 6, 2018, it gave the sports car an initial boost in speed, sort of like a slingshot that's been powering it through space ever since. And by November, that boost got it all the way to Mars. But Mars is just the first stop of many. The Roadster is currently on an elliptical path around the Sun, taking it past Venus and Mercury too. It completes one full orbit about every 557 days, and is scheduled to finish its first orbit before the end of 2019. Now, if nothing unexpected happens, like a miniature asteroid strike that could pummel the car to pieces, researchers predict that the Roadster will orbit the Sun for the next few million years. Sadly, it's too small and too far away to see in the night sky, even with the aid of a telescope. But eventually, it will make its way back to Earth. A team out of the University of Toronto projected the Roadster's orbit decades into the future. They discovered that in the year 2091, it will likely pass close enough to Earth that we'll be able to see it through a powerful telescope, like the Pan-STARRS telescope in Hawaii.
The government's response about not releasing the video provided more information than they might have expected.
In response to a public information request, the Navy says top secret UFO files could, quote, gravely damage U.S. national security if made public. And according to experts, that doesn't necessarily mean extraterrestrial.
This video you see here is a U.S. fighter jet, the USS Nimitz in San Diego, chasing off a UFO. The Department of Defense confirms this incident in a public information request, saying the release of these top secret materials would cause, quote, exceptionally grave damage to national security of the United States. The spokesperson also tells the media outlet the date of the 2004 USS Nimitz video is November 14th of 2004, and the video that's been circulating since 2007 is the same length as the video source.
What it could be is anyone's guess.
Vahey Perumian, professor of physics and astronomy at the University of Southern California, says he doesn't doubt there is someone who knows exactly what that unidentified flying object was.
So when I watched that video, you see an oblong object. You see it, and to me, the only thing it does, which is out of the ordinary, is how it zooms out of view at the end.
While Perumian believes in life on other planets, he says the DoD classifying this as something regarding national security could mean the UFO is anything from one of the US's adversaries to other technology in the works.
I don't think every object we see should be just immediately thought of as extraterrestrial.
With the race to the moon and talks of living on Mars, Perumian says there's no question our fascination with life on other planets is growing. In fact, he's teaching a new course this semester called Human Sediment and Exploration of the Solar System. The class explores where humans could go and eventually settle.
I think our solar system just presents so many possibilities for humanity to expand into that the possibilities are limitless.
Decades, the government had basically said Area 51 does not exist. Now the government has basically said, okay, yeah, technically, actually, it does exist. They said that in 2013, and now they're saying not only does Area 51 exist, but we've also spent millions of taxpayer dollars, something like $22 million, to investigate UFOs. It depends who you ask about Area 51. The government will say that it's where they used to test top secret planes or where they used to test nuclear warheads and nuclear bombs. But for 70 years worth of people who believe in UFOs, it's a place where the government keeps all these secrets about aliens that have crash landed on Earth. One of the most out there conspiracy theories centers around Roswell, New Mexico, where I guess most people who believe in UFOs, or many people believe that an alien spacecraft crashed there and was discovered by a farmer. So what people believe is that this alien spacecraft, and maybe even the alien bodies that were in the spacecraft, were picked up by the government, taken to Area 51, and that the government has for years been dissecting these alien bodies and trying to reverse engineer the UFO, trying to figure out all kinds of things from teleportation to interstellar travel, even time travel. Filmmaker Ray Santilli put out this video that he said was a result of the Roswell crash, and it shows people in lab coats, purported scientists, dissecting alien bodies, and it's put out there as the Roswell autopsy. The problem with a lot of these conspiracy theories is that they haven't really stood up to the test of time. Like the Roswell crash. That farmer did discover some things on his farmland, but what the Air Force later said was, yes, there was some top secret stuff going on. We were trying to spy on the Soviets, we were looking at their nuclear tests, but it wasn't aliens. And this Ray Santilli video is kind of debunked even more easily. He just said it was a fake. Here's what the government's admission means for these conspiracy theories. It's like pouring kerosene on these theories, right? Because now the government has admitted that Area 51 exists and is actually a thing.
And we're going to continue our investigation into how critics of 5G, the fifth generation of wireless technology, are being silenced. No, we're not taking a good look at this.
Right, let's take you to the case of Miss Claire Edwards. She lives in Vienna, Austria, where the rollout of 5G is actually already on. They have pre-5G in some public spaces like airports, one of the town squares, and her friends and her friends' kids are already reporting some of the symptoms of electromagnetic radiation poisoning: nosebleeds, headaches, chest pain, fatigue, cardiac pain, nausea. So being a UN staff member, she took this issue to the UN Secretary General and called for the halt of 5G at all UN base stations. Take a listen.
The highly dangerous biological effects of EMFs have been documented by thousands of studies since 1932, indicating that we may be facing a global health catastrophe orders of magnitude worse than those caused by tobacco and cigarettes. Mr. Secretary General, on the basis of the precautionary principle, I urge you to have these EMF emitting devices removed immediately from these buildings and to call a halt to any rollout of 5G at UN duty stations, because 5G is designed to deliver concentrated and focused electromagnetic radiation in excess of 100 times current levels in the same way as do directed energy weapons.
Finished talking with Danny Scherzen about the war on terror. And abroad, the war on terror is all about, bombing people, etc. Right. But at home, the other side to these war on terror policies is surveillance, and that's actually exactly what 5G is about. What we have with 5G is the ability to have smart city energy grids, water systems, self-driving cars. None of this would be possible without the rollout of 5G, which means every single device in your home has the possibility of being connected to the internet. We're talking everything from refrigerators to water bottles to babies' diapers. These are just some of the things that the industry is working on developing. But of course, in order to transmit transmit that amount of data, you're going to need exactly what we're looking at right now. Carriers are going to need these kind of base stations every few hundred feet. And so if the telecom industry's plans come to fruition, then no person or animal for that matter will be able to avoid exposure to this radio frequency radiation. And the problem with that is this: the peer-reviewed scientific literature that's been conducted independently already shows that RF radiation is harmful to biological life. So it's actually a biological toxin. Now, in the past, we've talked about the international appeal from over 180,000 scientists and doctors telling the UN to halt this international rollout. We've also talked about the largest, most expensive study to date connecting wireless radiation with things like cancers, which showed that rats that were exposed to this kind of radiation did develop brain tumors. But now I want to talk about how this is also a hazard to healthy reproduction, because we know, again, from independent scientific literature that men who keep cell phones in their pockets the longest have the lowest sperm count. And it's interesting because much of this research is not coming out of the US, it's coming out of Europe. And that has a lot to do with the funding that we see in a lot of our research institutions. But what's really significant is that the current standards for cell phone use, which were set up in the 90s, happened when the typical user was an adult male. It was typical, military, maybe medical or business person. And they set up these standards to avoid heating that kind of man, an over, the average weight person with a larger head. And here's how they set up those standards: a 6-minute phone call. So obviously these standards are out of date because people are now exposed to radiation continuously. Almost all of us have our phones on us all of the time. A lot of people sleep with their routers on.
So the study has not kept, the research has not kept up with the culture.
That's right. And we have to ask the question of, why is talk about this kind of research marginalized? So I spoke with Cecilia Doucette, who's the founder of a nonprofit called Wireless Education. She thinks that we need to get our public policy caught up with this science, and that the industry's deep pockets and the big lobbies are the reasons that many communities don't know that this radiation is a biological toxin. Take a listen.
Oftentimes you see that an industry will make a huge donation to a university that has been doing independent scientific investigation on radio frequency. And before you know it, the scientists' labs are closed down and they've lost their position. So long as the industry has control of the media and has control of our universities and has control of our government agencies, then they kind of have free rein to deploy the tobacco playbook, spin the good science so that we never see it, create their own science in short-term conditions that were done to deliberately show no harm, and continue to promote their toxic products, making it look like, oh, this is so great, 5G and the Internet of Things and faster speeds and greater downloads and all this data. But what do we even need that for?
The damage caused by one of several airstrikes in the northwest province of Idlib. Survivors try to salvage what's left. Emergency crews combed the rubble to recover the body of a child. Other civilians were among the casualties in Idlib city.
In the afternoon, Idlib city was targeted by Sukhoi 23 jets. They hit the industrial area and Al Hal market. Most of those hurt have serious injuries.
In a nearby hospital, friends console a father grieving his son. A ceasefire which started on Sunday was shattered on Wednesday. When Syrian and Russian jets attacked Idlib city as well as several rebel-held towns. The ceasefire was brokered by Turkey, which supports the rebels, and Russia, which backs the Syrian government's 9-month offensive. Fighters linked to al-Qaeda are the strongest forces in these areas, home to around 3 million civilians according to the UN. Close to 400,000 Syrians have been forced from their homes in Idlib in the past 10 weeks. The Kremlin says it's targeted rebels who've attacked civilian government-held areas in what's supposed to be a so-called de-escalation zone. Russia and Turkey are reported to have been negotiating the establishment of a secure zone for the displaced during the winter. And Russia has announced humanitarian corridors have already been established to allow people in Idlib to cross over into government-held territory. It's unclear how many have chosen to go.
the anger on the streets is not subsiding. After protests through the weekend, the slogans began again today at Sharif University, including one of death to the mullahs. There was a heavy security presence across Tehran and other cities, and activists have claimed that regime loyalists from the Basij militia beat and shot at them yesterday. But still they come out to protest. So is the action on the streets an existential threat to the system, or simply a safety valve for a politicized elite? Mazar, not her real name, has told us about her forays to the protests.
You know, with the governmental people, the people from the regime and the police ones, and a big crowd of them. Still, they were doing nothing, but they were focusing on the cars if anybody was taking a picture or not. They started to come and attack us, shoot fire on us, you know, with bullets and with tear gases and all of them. You can find everyone. You can find even from teenagers, you can find from students, university students, and also you can find mothers and fathers, people with old ages outside, who they do not want this regime anymore. 42 years living with the lies, living with this dictatorship, that they're done with it.
As the tensions continue, the Iranian ambassador in London was summoned for a dressing down at the Foreign Office. That followed the detention yesterday for a few hours of his British opposite number in Tehran. Condemning that arrest today, the Foreign Secretary said the Iranian government is at a crossroads.
The diplomatic door must be left open, because ultimately the only way to permanently de-escalate, which I think the phrase he used, is to have a diplomatic solution to all of the issues, from the nuclear front to the issue of Iran's destabilising activities in the region, and of course the dual nationals and many of the other bilateral issues. And we have been clear, and we're consistently clear, that that choice is there for the regime in Iran to make. And they can slip further into isolation with all of the consequences that will have for the people of Iran, or they can take the choice to come to the diplomatic, come through the diplomatic door, come to the negotiating table, and then I believe that over the long term, that is the only way all of these issues will be resolved.